all has to do with the lawsuit that the Omaha Fire Department has filed against the City Council, 5 City Council members, including yours truly. And the Court of Industrial Relations is holding their hearing tomorrow in Lincoln. And only one City Council member has been subpoenaed, and guess who it was? And so I spent about 3 hours today with the city attorney getting briefed, but you know what? He told me that people never look forward to being deposed, but actually I am looking forward to being deposed tomorrow. Because I know what our duties and I know what our powers are at City Council, and I feel very confident about what we did. So let me just start with that. Let me just start with the fire contract. The last fire contract that was approved was in 2004. Okay, so 2 mayors later, 7 years later, multiple trips to the CIR later, and we still don't have a fire contract. Not a fire contract that the City Council can approve. Now I will tell you, the mayor has got on the news and he said we had 17 executive sessions and we told the City Council everything going on in the City Council, knew everything being negotiated. And I will tell you that is not true. We had 17 executive sessions, and many of them was we'd sit in there and they'd say, we're almost there, and that was about it. Got a few more things to work on, and that was about it. But we made it very, very clear from when we were negotiating the police contract that there were numerous items in the police contract we didn't approve, but there were several that I made very clear that I wouldn't vote for the contract if they were in there. The same thing with the fire contract. The main issues I had, and there were multiple, but the main issues is there were very little concessions made for health care. And we all know what type of health care program they have in the city of Omaha, which is basically free health care. And the firefighters and individuals, health care is free. They pay nothing. The city pays 100%. Very little concessions were made for health care. They went from 0 to 4%. The city still pays 96% of it. That was one of my main issues. Another one of my issues was to get back to the table and address that health care issue, we had to have a shorter contract. This contract was through 2013, and I said I would not vote for a contract that binds us into a contract through 2013, especially with the new CIR law taking effect October 1st of this year. Another thing that was small in my opinion, but very important to me, was they added a taxpayer-paid union president. Now, that was very little as far as the budget goes, but we know that once you put something in a labor contract, you can never get it out. So why put it in? Their rationale is, well, you have it in a civilian contract, which we do, and we have it in police, which we do. That doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So why put it in the fire contract? Get it in there, we'll never get it out. It was my opinion, and I made it very clear all along, that if they want a full-time union president, I'm fine and dandy with that. But what we should do as a city is we should give that person, if they're elected union president, a non-paid leave of absence, guarantee him a position when he gets off being union president at the same place in the salary scale, and let the union pay for his benefits and his salary while he's union president. Absolutely. And let him come right back on. That was my position all along. So after we went through all of these executive sessions and we kept on telling the mayor, you do not have enough votes to pass this contract, you must listen to us, it won't get passed. The administration's point of view basically was, let's keep on browbeating the city council and maybe one of them will cave and we will get a contract. That was their rationale. It wasn't listen to the council, it wasn't let's try to negotiate more. It was just keep on the same track we're on now, and somebody will cave and we'll get it done. So what happens is they bring the original contract to the city council. It's attached to an ordinance because every act that every legislative act that the city council does is in the form of an ordinance. Every act. And we are the legislative body. We are the exclusive legislative body for the city. The mayor can't pass legislation. Only the city council can. The mayor can give proposed legislation to the city council for consideration, but we are the only ones that can pass it. So after all this time, we get the original contract on the agenda. All ordinances have to go through 3 readings. We went through the first reading. We went through the second reading, which was a public hearing. And on the third reading, what we did is we talked with each other and we said, okay, yes, we need a contract. The contract is good for the city. But the majority of us, 5 of us, could not live with the contract that we had. So I proposed 2 amendments. Franklin proposed 1 amendment. Chris Jerem and Pete Festerson proposed a 4th amendment. I said at the beginning of the third reading, which is when we vote, I said if all 4 amendments were passed, all 4, not 1, not 2, but all 4, I would be willing to give and take, and I would be willing to vote to ratify the contract. But all 4 had to pass. Pete and Chris, they only wanted 1 to pass. Franklin wanted all 4 to pass. So what happens? So we have all 4 amendments. Mine about the full-time union president gets voted down. My second one was to end the contract December 31st, 2011, so we could get back to the table. That didn't pass. Franklin's is that they will move to the civilian health care plan, which by the way is a lot better than my health care plan, but they will move to the civilian health care plan. That was voted down. I supported all 4 amendments, so I voted for all 4. So I voted for Chris Jerem's, which was to end the contract in a year, and it was a few other little items, but only 1 ended up passing. So it was the union's position that we did not know what we were doing, but we knew exactly what we were doing. I made the statement in the beginning, all 4 passed, I'll vote for it. Only 1 passed, I didn't vote for the contract then. So we amended the contract, but I didn't vote to approve it. Franklin was the same way. He said he wanted all 4 or he wouldn't vote for it. Only 1 got passed, so he voted it down. Gary Burnett and Ben Gray would have voted for it no matter what. So they voted, but the problem is they didn't want any amendments. None. And since there was 1 amendment on the contract, Gary Burnett and Ben Gray voted no on the contract too. So there were 4 no votes. Franklin and I voted no because we wanted all the amendments. Ben and Gary voted no because they didn't want any amendments. Now, it did look pretty stupid to some people, but it made perfect sense to me. So we amended the contract, only 1 amendment, but it wasn't good enough, and we voted it down. So we voted the contract down. So what is the mayor's solution? The mayor's solution is we're going to just bring that original contract back. We're going to put it back on the agenda again. We're going to go through 3 readings again. We're going to go through another public hearing again. And we'll try to browbeat the city council into submission in the next 4 weeks. And hopefully they'll vote for it this time. So we got our heads together and we said, we've been through it, we're not going to do it again. We voted it down already. We're not going to go through a public hearing again. So when it went on the agenda for first reading, we placed it on file. And when you place it on file, it's basically a negative vote, but it basically kills the whole contract. It's gone for right now. We can bring it back as a city council whenever we want. The mayor can't bring it back right now. So it's killed. It's on file right now. Because we told the mayor we're not going to go through 3 readings again. We're not going to go through a public hearing again. We told you what we wanted. You ignored what we wanted. So what the union did is immediately they file a lawsuit against the 5 of us that proposed amendments. All 5 of us that had amendments on there. And they are charging us with unfair labor practices. Because what they are saying is that we were negotiating the contract in public. That those amendments were negotiating the contract in public. And we weren't negotiating that contract. What we were doing is exercising the authority that the city charter gives us. The city charter says, like I said before, that the legislative branch is the city council exclusively. All legislative acts that city council does is by ordinance. And then the city charter goes on to say that the city council has the authority to approve, reject, repeal, or amend any and all ordinances. That's what the city charter says. So the city charter says we can amend any ordinance. And there is a history with that too. With the police contract, when we were given the police contract last summer, a year ago summer, we amended it, and we laid it over, and we sent it back to the police to renegotiate, fully knowing that they could go at the table, they could accept it, they would have to re-vote on it. Came back to the city council with some changes, and it was approved a year ago, August. With the police management contract, we did the same thing. We got the contract, we amended it, we sent it back to the management, we sat down with the management, we renegotiated it, they brought it back, we got a contract approved. We did the same thing with the fire. It was okay with the police, it was okay with police management, but we did it with the fire, and it's unfair labor practices. So, the CIR case is tomorrow, the hearing is tomorrow down in Lincoln. I'm the only one that has been subpoenaed, so I've been being briefed about 4 hours today by our city attorney. But again, I'm looking forward to it because I'm very comfortable with our role. I'm very comfortable with what we did. We were not negotiating, we were amending what the city charter gives us the right to do, and we were going to send it back to the union and say negotiate it, and then vote it up or down. You have the right to do that. So that's where we are with that. Our goal is to get a contract. And as you know, after we placed that on file, we had talked about this many times before, but we said again, 7 years ago was the last contract approved. 2 mayors, Fahey couldn't do it, Suttle couldn't do it, multiple trips to the CIR. It was time to take this in a whole different direction. And we felt like the best thing to do at this point in time was to take the authority to negotiate a labor contract away from the mayor and bring it back to the city council. And that's what we did. We did pass it by resolution. The city charter, when it was written in 1956, gave negotiating powers to the city council. The city council, by resolution, several years ago, many years ago in the 70s, they gave that negotiating authority to the mayor by a resolution. They've made some changes in it as the years passed on. In fact, it's kind of interesting. The last change that was made was proposed by City Councilman Paul Koenig, who later became a fireman. And it was approved by acting mayor Paul Koenig, because he was the acting mayor at the time. That was the last time that there was an issue on the agenda about who had the negotiating authority. But the City Council felt like Mayor Jim Suttle was not paying attention to what we were saying. And he was not willing to negotiate a contract that we could accept. So it was time to move in a different direction. Our goal is to get a contract, and our goal is to hire the best independent negotiator we could find. We don't want someone elected. We don't want anybody that we want somebody apolitical as we possibly can get. We had a huge list of attorneys that were interested. We narrowed it down to 4. 2 from out of town, 2 from within Omaha. And we are going to start the interviews next week. We're going to interview Thursday and Friday of next week. And we intend to get somebody darn good in there that's going to sit down with these guys and they're going to negotiate a good contract. Now, that's not to say that the city council couldn't give that negotiating authority back to the mayor if we had a different mayor. So we're not saying that we have to keep this forever, but we figure it's time to go in a new direction. We also got a letter from the fire chief recently, and he said basically, I'm not doing what Chief Hayes did. I will negotiate my contract, you will basically accept it, or I will sue you and I will go to the CIR and get all my money. And that's what the fire chief said. So we will probably have our negotiator negotiate the fire chief's contract too. But that's what we decided to do. And again, we want to get a contract, that's the end result, but what we want is somebody good in there that is not going to bring the politics, it wasn't influenced by donations, doesn't have to worry about running again, and we want to get somebody really good in there to do this. So again, one's from Wichita, one's from Chicago, and 2 groups are local. And we're going to see how that goes next week, but hopefully within a month we will have a negotiator who will get this process going. Now, the union is saying right now, we will not negotiate with the city council. We're done. We won't negotiate again. They have to. I mean, you know, we could accuse them of unfair labor practices. They have to get back to the table and negotiate. They could have maybe a small case with 12 and 13 because they did negotiate a contract with 12 and 13, but 14 on, they got to get back to the table. They're going to have to. If they want a contract, they have to negotiate. If they refuse, it's at their own peril. So that's what our goal is with that. Yes?
2 questions. With the negotiations being done by a lawyer for the city council, is it a simple yes, up or down vote, or can you amend it once it comes up for reading?
We can amend anything.
Okay.
But with this independent negotiator, what we did is we formed a new committee of the city council. It's a subcommittee. It's called Labor Negotiations. And they made me the chair of it. The city council did. It was done in executive session, so I'm chairing that. And the other members are Festerson and Jerem. There's an odd freeze, but anyway, that's who's on it. And what our goal is us three are going to be interviewing the candidates, not all 7 council members. And then we are going to make a recommendation to the entire council in executive session of who we want. And we will give them all the reason why. We're going to give the rest of the council every opportunity they want to interview these people if they want. But we're going to make a recommendation. Yes, Mr. Dow.
First, how well served we are by your leadership. Don't you think, everybody? And you. A comment and an editorial comment. I hope everybody heard what you said about the fact that we don't just have rank and file collective bargaining. Over the years, you have the chiefs or the managers of each department also have their separate collective bargaining unit. So when the deal gets cut, you have a union on one side of the table for management negotiating with the union on the other side of the table, which is rank and file, knowing that what they give the rank and file they're going to get in their own contract, which is the incestuousness of the relationship, which means that the next mayor and or a charter review commission should change the charter to prohibit management from having a union. That's one thing that should be something that I think with Ohio, Wisconsin, that's something we should do. I have the editorial comment now. I'm opposed to the council negotiating labor contracts. I understand why you're doing it, and I accept the explanation that you're giving with great affection and respect. But ultimately, the caution I offer is that you could end up with the Trojan horse, vis-a-vis Mr. Jerem and Mr. Festerson, laying the groundwork for what becomes a trap, just as the compromise out of the legislature was a trap. Because we now have a CIR law that's worse than the one we had. Because it now gives jurisdiction over fringe benefits, over health care, and over pensions, which the CIR never had jurisdiction over in the first place. So it's even worse now going forward. So I wish you well, because I think all you need to demonstrate tomorrow as a lawyer is that what you did was in good faith, and their goose ought to be cooked under current state law. So God bless you tomorrow, and good luck.
Well, and I can tell you this, Mr. Dodd, if you were mayor, we wouldn't be doing this. That's for sure.
Go get him tomorrow.
Now, I will say this. One of the reasons that I was subpoenaed is if any of you watched the hearing when we were asking the fire union questions before we voted on this contract, I got the union president up and I asked him several questions. And one question I asked him is, what was the result of the vote? Because he kept it a secret. He did not tell the council, and he did not tell his union members. They kept it a secret. I also asked him about wanting to be a full-time taxpayer-paid union position. And I asked him what the union paid him, because I wanted to know if we were going to pay him what his full compensation was. I asked him those 2 questions. One of the angles they're going to take tomorrow is I was trying to intimidate the union president. Boo-hoo. I don't know if any of you have heard about the Inferno that came out, but if you want to talk about intimidation, I have a copy of the Inferno, which is their newsletter that comes out every other month. Talk about intimidation. There is a 2-page editorial from Steve LeClaire that absolutely blasts me and the rest of the council for 2 pages. There are 2 really nice cartoons about me. This one, I'm telling a firefighter I want his firstborn son. And this one is me and Dave Navity with sledgehammers destroying solidarity. Now, if you want to talk, and here's what they have me saying. It's funny, I lied, and I said I value public safety, and I use the firefighters to get elected. But now that I'm elected, I want to destroy them. Talk about intimidation. And then there's another, this is just so full of propaganda. Here's one of a hazmat truck that's broken in two, and if you read the article, it's the city council's fault. We did that, we broke that truck. And then at the end, I thought there was just one little interesting tidbit in here. It was a table of involvement of the union members. And if you can remember, a while back, we were approached by Senator Ashford and Senator Lathrop, and they wanted to be the negotiators for the contract. That's no secret, that was out in the news. There is a Senator Lathrop Appreciation Day at Mahoney State Park in here. Now, wouldn't you want that person negotiating this contract? So anyway, if anybody wanted to look at this, this is really something. But I'll be happy to answer more questions, but I want to tell you just a few more things going on right now. Bond rating, let me talk about that real quickly. You saw in the paper that the city has maintained the AAA bond rating for both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. There was a lot of push from Mayor Suttle to get this fire contract approved, because if we didn't get it approved, he said the bond rating would be decreased and it would be the city council's fault. You know, we received a warning from one of the bond raters about a month ago, and that was a threat because the city of Omaha is so closely tied with getting federal funds. So they basically, I think, unfairly tied us with the problems with the federal government, and the city of Omaha, as well as about 170 other cities across the country, received a warning letter saying you receive a lot of federal funds, therefore you're closely tied to the federal government, therefore you stand a chance of your bond rating dropping. Now, as Mr. Dodd knows, and many of you know, that the city's bond rating is dependent on a number of factors. And the unfunded pension liability is one of them. The labor contract they are looking at. But it's basically, they look at all of your debt and how you manage your debt. And so they went to the bond raters and they maintained the AAA bond rating for now, which is a good thing, because we're going to be issuing next year a lot of sewer bonds, although the sewer bonds are not general obligation bonds, and they usually never receive a AAA rating. But it's always good to have a AAA rating, but to say that that AAA rating was totally dependent upon this fire contract, it was not. I think there's a lot of accusations with Mayor Suttle that they were crying wolf quite a bit on that, but you know, we do need a contract, there's no doubt. It's a good thing we've maintained our AAA bond rating. A couple of the things that the bond raters did like is we put money into the cash reserve. That was looked at favorable. So I think that financially right now the city isn't in as bad a shape as it was before. It's always interesting when the mayor's office wants to do something, they can always pull up and find $1 million or $2 or $3 or $4 to do something that they want to do. But I don't think that the city's financial situation is quite as bad as it was. The restaurant tax that was imposed was last year. It was supposed to bring in about $14 million a year. It's bringing in about 20 plus. You know, we raised the wheel tax from 35 to 50. That's bringing in a lot more money. We've raised property taxes. I shouldn't say we, because I don't want to make myself sound like I did that, but 15% in the last 2 years. So there is a lot of additional revenue coming in. Flood. Let's talk about the flood just for a minute. Right now, the flood costs are about $15 million as far as the city's costs. The flood, we have no idea what the repair will be. We tore up a lot of concrete to put those pumps in. Some of the water treatment plants have got a lot of damage. We've got a lot of cleanup to do. Right now, we're at about $15 million. Our insurance, it will be paid for basically in 3 different ways. FEMA money. We have insurance money. We've already received about $5 million in insurance money, and then the Army Corps takes basically care of the levies. And the FEMA money should pay 75%, and then the other 25% is supposed to be split between the city and the state. So basically, the city of Omaha should be responsible for about 25% of the total amount, but we really don't know yet with the cleanup how much it will cost. But we think we are in pretty good shape as far as paying for the flood. The city's finance director has encumbered quite a bit of money to pay for the flood, and so I think right now we're okay. The levies are okay, they're holding out, there's some repair work to do, but the Army Corps basically takes care of those. So right now we're right at about $15 million, and we'll see as far as the cleanup goes how much it will cost. But water's going down, and things are looking good as far as the flood goes. We did have, I'll be quick, we did have a meeting today. I wanted to tell you just a couple other things. Snow plowing for the winter. We had 23 bidders this year, and we hired 18 companies, private companies. I have a map if anybody is interested in which areas of town are going to have private contractors, but approximately 40% of the city will be plowed by private contractors. The first year we did this, I received tons of phone calls saying, what is the matter with you? My streets aren't plowed. Last year I did not receive any, which is really surprising. So I think those private contractors are doing a pretty good job. Now I have a lot of areas that are annexed in my area, so that's going to be a challenge because they're used to having private in there. The last thing I wanted to bring up is the auditor. For the public safety auditor, that once again, that's been brought up many times, and I think it's quite a controversy. There is going to be a rally on the steps of City Hall tomorrow. It's Ernie Chambers, Tristan Bond, Sam, what's Sam's name? Walker? All those guys are going to have a big rally saying we need a public safety auditor. And Ben Gray is proposing a city charter change. He wants to make a public safety auditor department in the city, and he wants it to be a charter change so that you have to fund it and you can't take it out. And you know, being in the city charter doesn't mean you fund it. I mean, we've defunded departments all year, the past 2.5 years. Basically, I don't know, I welcome your input, but I don't think it's needed. You know, I think that is the job of the police chief to do that. It's his job to discipline. This incident that people are so concerned about right now, which happened in May, I think the general feeling out in the public is that Alex Hayes knew about it and wasn't going to do anything about it, but when the video was leaked and made public, then he was going to do something about it. Well, that's not really true. I'm on the Public Safety Committee. I meet with Alex once a month. Alex knew about it in May. He was already investigating it. He was already deciding on what discipline to do. He was taking care of it the way his job tells him to take care of it. But I think generally that if you have a good police chief and he does his job, I think that that's probably not a necessary thing to have. And Alex does do quite a good job. Of course, you never know who's going to be the next police chief, but if he doesn't do his job, then he should be removed. But I think he's doing a very good job at what he does. Most of those internal complaints are police. I know they brought up the old party house fire incident out on 168th Street, the party house out there at the fire station from years ago. I think just to bring up that things happen and they're covered up. But generally, those internal problems are with our police. I mean, if you look at what happened this past weekend, it's a war zone out there in North Omaha. And, you know, for all the problems we had with the police contract, the police need the support of the public now. And we don't want to divide the public from the police now because they are having a heck of a time up in North Omaha with all these shootings. And I think they need our support. And if we could buy a few more cops with the money we would spend on an auditor, that's my opinion. How that's
You're so right. And if you get a super police chief built into the charter, you will never get a good police chief because you'll have a civilian locked into the charter who cannot be fired like the city attorney. The only one who can't be fired is the city attorney under a charter. Everybody else can be fired, including police chiefs and fire chiefs at the will of the pleasure of the mayor. You'll never get a good police chief. So you are so right, and I appreciate and compliment your thoughts there. One last thing. Tell us about redistricting for city council members.
Yeah. That was going to be a dandy too. We'll probably do it in November. Every city council member was asked to do a couple maps of some changes that they could make that they could live with.
Did you keep yourself in your same district?
Well, that wasn't exactly some of the requirements. My district did not have any needs. I would, of course, mine was just fine the way it was. Ben Gray lost 4,000 people. Tom Mulligan's was the big problem. He had 7,000 too many. He's in District 7 up north, Segerson's old district. So we had some issues to do, but every council member submitted a couple plans. Of course, there was one city council member that submitted a plan that put Franklin Thompson and me in the same district because they wanted to get rid of one or the other of us. And what they did is if people know where I live and Franklin live, you'd ask yourself, how in the world could they have done that? Because of where we live. But they kind of made this big blob in the middle, and then they made a whole western city council district that went north and south and took in all of the Elkhorn area and out west. And I kind of wanted that one to get out in the public, because I would have loved to have talked about that in the public. But I don't think that that's going to happen that way. We've been working on maps, and I think that the one that we are going to approve has, well, for my district, it doesn't have really a whole lot of changes. There's a small area north of center that I have around in the west side area that I'm going to give back to Franklin. And I'm going to take in a little more out west with the new annexed areas I have, because we've annexed Hawthorne, Autumn Ridge, LeBeau, some areas out west, so I get a lot more people with that anyway. And I get to keep my lower part of Elkhorn, which I wanted to keep. I actually, with Elkhorn, I wanted to either keep what I had or take it all, but I didn't want to give it all up, because I like representing Elkhorn. So anyway, I think it will, right now it's at the election commissioner's office, the map that we kind of agreed to, and I think right now, not everybody got what they wanted, but I think it's a give and take, and I think it's something that we can all live with.
What happens to Jerem's district?
Very little.
What happens to Seekerson's old district?
He is going to, well, he's going to lose some. Festerson is going to move west some into Mulligan's district, and then Franklin's going to move north and take a little hunk out of it, the south. But he's the one that, like I said, has the most problems. So he's going to move. Mulligan will lose some of the eastern part and a little bit of the southern part, and that will even his out. Because Franklin actually gains people with annexation too. Franklin and I gain the most. Jerem and Gary, very little changes. Festerson had to give up more, and Ben did. So it's really not too bad, but I think you'll see that come in November. So it's not as bad as I thought.